He'll start to talk with me. Timing was perfect. Our topic is the Rebbe Marash. Yesterday was his birthday. His name was Reb Shmuel. He was the fourth Lubavitcher Rebbe. And he was born, according to most accounts, in the year 1834. Now the reason I say according to most accounts, because there's one account where it says that he was born in 1833. According to most accounts, he was born in 1834, which is Tov Kuf Tzadik Dalet. And it's really strange. He was born 6 years after his grandfather, the Mittel Rebbe, passed away. His mother's father. But he wasn't named after his grandfather, the Mittel Rebbe, Dov Ber. He was named after a Tzaddik Nistan, who was a water carrier in Polotsk, whose name happened to be Shmuel. That was the name that Tzemach Tzedek chose. And the wife agreed. The Rebbe Zachaya Mushka, who was the Mittel Rebbe's daughter, agreed that they should name their Ben Zekunim, their last child, who was much younger than his brothers, not after her father, who had passed away so recently, but after a water carrier from Polotsk, who was a Tzaddik Nistan, the Mittel Rebbe Marash. The Rebbe Marash was a very interesting man. Fascinating person. Really a fascinating person. In some ways, he was the boldest of all the Lubavitcher Rebbes. You can't measure a Rebbe against a Rebbe. You know, Rebbeim choose paths. Why a Rebbe chooses one path or another path, you'll have to ask him why. But every Rebbe goes in a different direction. They're all Rebbes, they're all the Siyah Yisrael, and yet each one is so distinctive. The Rebbe Marash, if you wanted to put it in plain words, was the king of the world. He was afraid of no one and nothing, mamish. He was afraid of no one and nothing, ever. As a little boy, he was afraid of nothing. He had such guts. He had so much confidence. He always had a smile on his face. Always had a smile on his face. And when he looked at you, you started shaking, trembling, begashmias, from fear. And you just say to yourself, why am I afraid of? All he's doing is smiling. But that was his power. On Yidden and Lahadl non-Yidden. When the Rebbe Maharash looked in your direction, you began to shake. In many ways, he was extremely gutsy. He did things in Russia to challenge the Russian government. He started up with the Russian government. Russia used to have pogroms. And when Russia had pogroms, they were not mistakes. The government used to arrange the pogroms. Because one of the ways that the Russian citizens, who were all very poor and had very hard lives, from stopping complaining to the government, was they'd give them a scapegoat. Whenever the people in Russia made riots, because there wasn't enough food, or because there was no safety in workplaces, so the government would arrange pogroms, so the Russians would get shaken, they'd go out and kill Jews, and they forgot that the real enemy was the monarchy. This happened over and over again. Over and over again. And the Rebbe Marash, near the end of his life, basically went to Western Europe and he put newspaper articles, all the big capitals, protesting how Russia was not protecting its Jews, and they went straight back to Petersburg. They wanted to kill him. And he told them, you think I'm afraid? I'm not thinking about myself, but I'm not going to let you kill Jews and sit by and watch and say, wait for my appointment. He was a god, his brain was unbelievable. He was such a holy tzaddik. And there was something about him that was very humble at the same time. There was an integrity to him. That's what a Rebbe is. A Rebbe is a complete person, If you knew the Rebbe, and I hate to say it, that some of you may feel like you didn't know the Rebbe, you don't know him yet. There was never a big Balgaiva in the world of the Rebbe. There was never a bigger honor in the world of the Rebbe. They're both true. Personally, the Rebbe was nothing. But in terms of his work, he was the king of the world. The Rebbe Marash epitomized that also, mamish, in an extraordinary way. The Rebbe called it being like the Baal Shem Tov. He ruled. The Baal Shem Tov was afraid of nobody. Goyim, you were afraid of the Baal Shem Tov. Kings and princes were afraid of the Baal Shem Tov. The Rebbe Marash had such a character and but there's a side of him which had so much integrity. And the truth of the matter is that if the Rebbe Marash had a little less integrity, he would have had a lot less tzaddis. When his father passed away, 3 of his brothers became his competitors. They opened up different branches of Chabad. The Rebbe Marash ended up with the fewest chassidim. And it was all his own fault. It was all his fault. If the Rebbe Marash had done what his father told him to do, the Tzemach Tzedek, he would have avoided that whole thing. He would have been a big Rebbe like his father, the Tzemach Tzedek, was. But the Rebbe Marash was a man of principle. He only did the right things. He didn't do the wrong things. Whatever the cost was, he paid the price. This is the Rebbe Marash. And I guess the only way to say that that's what a real person is. A real person does whatever they have to do, how they have to do it. When they have to be a Balgaiva, they're a Balgaiva. When they're an Onav, they're an Onav. And you never ever say, the ends justify the means. I can make this mistake to make this better and easier. I don't mean to tell you the story now. That Tzemach Tzedek told him to sit down on his chair. Tzemach Tzedek told the Rebbe Marash, sit down on my chair. And the Rebbe Marash said, I can't. Tzemach Tzedek said, if you don't sit on my chair, you're going to suffer. He said, I can. And he suffered. Because he had an emes to him, One of the things, he passed away all at 47 and a half. He was born 1834, and he passed away in 1882. How many years is that? He was not yet 48. He was 47 and a half when he passed away. One of the things which you know a lot about Benegir the Rebbe Marash was his physical health. The Rebbe Marash was a man who suffered from many, many ailments. He had a lot of illnesses. It's hard to know when these illnesses started and how bad these illnesses became. But the Rebbe Marash was a man who, by the time he passed away, was in chronic pain. He was always in pain. He suffered physically a lot. Somebody told me this in the Rebbe's journal, in the Rebbe's Reshimah, it describes how when the Rebbe Marash was a young man, he had pus pockets in his bloodstream. So a guy told me that Rebbe had leukemia in Pashut. I mean, what do I know about pus pockets in bloodstream? You're talking about the 1850s. What do they know about cancer? I'm sorry for using that word, in the 1850s, But he was very, very sick. Very, 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 very sick. And he wouldn't tell his father. He wouldn't tell his father. Why? His father was a Rebbe, his father was a tzaddik, his father was a shalikim, his father could perform miracles. He didn't want his father to worry about him. And his illness got worse. The Tzemach Tzedek found out about the Rebbe's illness, the Rebbe Marash's illness, quote unquote, by mistake. His son never told him. Somebody else had got to him. And the Tzemach Tzedek called him in and said to his son, I don't understand. You're so sick. Why didn't you tell me? I doubt he even answered. I don't think that Rebbe Marash told him. I didn't want to upset. He didn't say a word. And the Tzemach said to him, had you told me sooner, I could have helped you more. Had you told me earlier, I could have helped you more. Lepoyo, the Tzemach Tzedek felt that the Rebbe Marash's life required big miracles. And he said, all this is in the Rebbe's journal, you should live as long as Shmuel HaNavi. Does anybody know how long Shmuel HaNavi lived? 52, which is it's not old. The Tzemach Tzedek said, I wish he'll live as long as Shmuel HaNavi, of course, which made sense, because his name was Shmuel. He didn't live 52 years. He lived 47 and a half years. He lived into his 48th year. Now, there's very clear evidence today that the Rebbe Marash gave his life away. He was supposed to live more. When the pogroms that I told you about before in 1882, the Rebbe Marash stopped the pogroms, he said then, he told his wife, told the Rebbe Rivka, and I'll get to it later on in the story, that I'm giving my life for this. So maybe what the Tzemach Tzedek had predicted, that the Rebbe Marash was supposed to live 52 years, could have come to pass. It didn't. He passed away at the age of 47 and a half. He passed away in his 48th year. And again, people say that part of the reason his life was so short is because he had this illness. Derech Agav, I'll tell you a very interesting thing. The Tzemach Tzedek had 7 sons. Tzemach Tzedek had 7 sons who were all Gedolei Yisrael. Tzemach Tzedek lived into his 70s. Tzemach Tzedek passed away at 77 years old, at 76 years old, 75 years old. None of his sons lived into 70s. They passed away in their late 50s, or they passed away very young. Some younger than others, but nobody lived. The oldest son, I think, lived like 62, 63, and that was considered early longevity. Oh, the Alter Rebbe, the Tzemach Tzedek, at some point in his life, commented, the Tzemach Tzedek said, Ich hab euch gepoilt Yud Beis Shvatim. Ich hab aber vergessen zu beten wegen Arichas Yom. Tzemach Tzedek said, I was managed to negotiate that I should have 12 tribes. 12 tribes. But I forgot to ask that they should have long life. So they passed away young. The Rebbe Marash passed away at 47. Some of his brothers passed away even younger. They didn't have such long. The Maril passed away, Tovkul Chav Zayin. He may have been a little bit older, but they didn't have it. Nobody lived till 70. They passed away in the early 60s, late 50s. Now, if that Tzemach Tzedek's quote is correct, he said, you have to say that it doesn't only mean his sons. It means some of his grandsons. But he said 12 Shvatim, he meant 12 Rebbes. 12 tzaddikim that were going to come from him, but most of them, or all of them, passed away quite young. The Rebbe Marash was all of 47 and a half. And like I told you, he suffered as a young man, he suffered from illnesses. And later in life, he suffered from other illnesses. We know that the Rebbe Marash was very fat, he was very heavy. A lot of people say, you go online, you can see it. Just go to Wikipedia, or certainly Hebrew Wikipedia, or Chabad.org, look at the Rebbe Marash. They actually have a picture of him. Oh, the Rebbe Marash looks exactly like the Frierdiker Rebbe, except that the payas are different. It's mamish the Frierdiker Rebbe's look.
Pictures on Chabad.org.
If you go to Chabad.org also, you've seen it?
No, I'm asking.
Oh, you're asking? I think so. I Wikipedia. I don't tell stories because I read them online. I tell stories because they're in my memory, and sometimes I say, what have I made that up? I try to find sources. So I go online to find the sources for the stories that are already in my head, and sometimes I discovered that I got them all messed up. But I was looking for something, and I found two pictures that are attributed to Rebbe Marash. A lot of people say that there's a photo of it. When I was a kid growing up, the rumor was that there is a picture of the Rebbe Marash, and the Rebbeim did not publicize it because he was very fat, and he doesn't look good in the photo, so the decision was made not to publicize it. I really don't buy that. It doesn't make sense to me. A Rebbe, a tzaddik, doesn't look bad. A tzaddik, a Rebbe, always looks okay. Good, perfect, wonderful. It doesn't mean there's no picture. But if there is a picture from the Rebbe Marash, which is not public, it's for spiritual reasons, not because he was overweight. I promise you that. If you ask me, I believe there is a picture from the Rebbe Marash. I do believe it. I believe that these photos that they put up are actually him. The fact that the Rabbeim did not give us these pictures, I don't believe for a second is because he was heavy. There's some other reason why. And I'm just going to tell you something, Derech Agav. In the olden days, listen, guys, you have to understand something, right? When was the first camera produced?
By the Civil War.
Huh?
By the Civil War.
A little before the Civil War. In other words, in times of Alter Rebbe, there was no such thing as a camera. Period. It was just artists and paintings. In Halacha, it says you're not allowed to make a three-dimensional image. You're not allowed to make a sculpture of a human face. It's not allowed. It's Kenshet Avei Zara. You're not allowed to make a three-dimensional bust, where the nose is sticking out, and the eyes are sticking out, and the ears are sticking out. If you make a likeness of a person, you have to break the nose off, because the nose is considered the past. You're not allowed to make a pesel. You're not allowed to make the likeness of a person. It's not allowed. It's usher. So if you're from Yid, you don't want somebody else making a likeness of you either, because it's usher. If you're not allowed to make it yourself, you wouldn't want somebody making it as you. What about the two-dimensional image? Are you allowed to get an artist to paint your likeness? And then, of course, in modern times, are you allowed to take pictures? So technically, it's allowed. A lot of Gedolei Yisrael were against it. They were against it. They were not only against pictures, they were against artist drawings. People did not want artists making their likenesses based on this law. The Tasbachal called Pesel, called Tmuna. Pesel means a three-dimensional image. Tmuna actually means a picture. Well, however, the halacha translates Tmuna. There was a controversy in the olden days about having photos. Okay.
What about a doll? Like these days, dolls.
So the dolls don't look like babies. If the dolls look very human, you have to chip off the nose. Now you don't have to chip off the nose and have a hole the size of the Lincoln Tunnel, but you halacha, you're not allowed to have a doll.
You know those glass dolls?
If they look exactly like a person, you have to chip off the nose. That's the din. I remember we once made, for like Bohemian Parade, the Kalim of the Beis Hamikdash. So we took two dolls, painted them gold, put wings on them, and they were the Kruvim. And like 6 o'clock in the morning on Sunday, a guy was going to shul. He said, you got to chip off the nose. I was like, thank you very much. We worked weeks on it. So we showed him we had already chipped off the nose. Al pi halacha, you have to chip off the nose. When it came to two-dimensional images, it was an issue. Now, the Rebbe himself, if you look at pictures of the Rebbe before he was Rebbe, you'll notice that every time they're taking a picture of the Rebbe is scratching his nose. If you look at photos of the Rebbe, our Rebbe, before he was Rebbe, he had his finger on his nose. And it's so funny. How come he's always scratching his nose? The answer is because of the photographer. When someone came took the Rebbe's picture, some people would go like this. The Rebbe would just do this. Because if he covered the nose, it's not part of the problem. You could see many photos of the Rebbe. Before he was Rebbe, they just put his finger on his nose. You think he's scratching his nose, but he's doing it for the camera. After the Rebbe became Rebbe, he continued to block his face. There was a photographer named Trainer Studios. He took all the wedding pictures of Lubavitchers, and he took all the wedding pictures with the Rebbe himself as Masada Kedushin, and he said to the Rebbe, he wants the Rebbe to not put his finger on his nose, because he sells the pictures better if it's pushed up on nose. So the Rebbe stopped doing it. A man told me, personally, that he was told that you're not allowed to have pictures. He was a Svardish man, a hot-blooded man. He took all the pictures he owned and threw them into fire. He had pictures of his deceased father that he has no more pictures of. He had pictures of the Frierdiker Rebbe, which he burned, and the pictures of the Amshanav Rebbe, was a famous tzaddik that he burnt. He later regretted it. So he came to our Rebbe and he told the Rebbe, and the Rebbe said to him like this. I'll say just in English, I'll say it in Yiddish. It's true, there used to be a klipa attached to pictures. There used to be a klipa. There was a reason not to take pictures. But when the Rabbeim saw the benefit of people having their photos, they took away the klipa. And once they took the klipa away, they took the klipa away completely. So there's a very weird thing. You know the picture of the Rebbe Rashab? Yeah? That picture was a passport picture. And it was taken a few months before he passed away, the last weeks of his life, mamish. Because there was a hope that the Rebbe Rashab would move to Eretz Yisrael. And the Rebbe Tzchayamushka said that's not how my grandfather looked. My grandfather was in such a bad mood that day, he didn't look like that. The Rebbe Rashab allowed himself to sit for a photo. And remember, in 1920, we took a picture, you had to sit for 15 minutes until the shutter would come out clear, you know. Photography is advanced. I mean, today you don't even have a film. Boom, 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 instantaneous, it's electronic. In the olden days, you had to take a picture and you had to have a film and you had to develop it. It took hours of intense work. Today, it's a joke. The Rebbe allowed himself to be photographed because of a passport picture. The picture remained. In the last 15 years, they found another picture of the Rebbe Rashab from years before. It looks gorgeous. And it became a big controversy. Is it the Rebbe Rashab or not? The reason it's a controversy is because we know for a fact that the Rebbe Rashab did not want a picture taken. When the Rebbe Rashab used to go out in public, and he was afraid of photographers, there's a description of him going to Tashlich in Lubavitch with a shtreimel. He's surrounded by himself with the tallest vachrim. The photographer is not taking his photo. A guy came on a houseboat, on a boat, along the lake near Lubavitch, and as the Rebbe Rashab was standing by Tashlich, he took his picture. And the Frierdiker Rebbe describes it in his Yeshimis, and he writes underneath, I know I'm not supposed to say this, but I hope the picture came out good. Because the Rebbe Rashab did not want, but privately he took a photo. So it's hard for me to understand it. It's very possible that there is a photo of the Rebbe Marash, but it's not public. But to get back to my original point, I do not think for a minute, it just doesn't make sense to me, that the reason the picture is not public is because he was heavy. But the Rebbe Marash was very fat. But he wasn't fat from eating, he was ill. He had some kind of metabolic disease. In other words, he couldn't digest food properly. He was a man who was in constant pain, all kinds of illnesses. And he had that permanent smile on his face, and he would look in your direction, you would start to shake, and you were asking yourself, why am I afraid? He's such a nice guy. So there's a detail to this. If you know anything about the Chabad Rabbeim, there were different styles. You know, some Rabbeim were purely involved in Kiddush. They didn't know anything about the world. Like the Mittel Rebbe, like the Tzemach Tzedek in some ways, like the Rebbe Rashab. Other Rabbeim just were Kazmabal, they knew everything. Like the Alter Rebbe, like the Rebbe Marash, like our Rebbe, like the Frierdiker Rebbe, they knew everything. The Rebbe Marash spoke, 20 languages. He just knew stuff, you know. He studied medicine himself. He bought Latin books of medicine, but you're talking, you know how many years you're talking? You're talking now the 1860s, he passed away in 1882. What kind of medicine do they have then? Today, that medicine is considered alchemy, you know, hocus pocus. It was the best medicine of the time. He studied medicine, and he used to mix his own medicines. He didn't go to the pharmacy and buy drugs. He went to the pharmacy and bought compounds. Today, you can't, if you buy drugs without a prescription, you go to jail, you know. There were no rules then, because all of this was all brand new, you know. Not so long ago, you could buy cocaine in a drugstore, nobody said boo. Today it kills people because all of these things were brand new. And he would mix his own medicines. He would make his own medicines. He would heal himself. So there's a very upsetting story. It's the only real story I know about it. This happened when he was already at Rebbe. He was already at Rebbe when this happened. He woke up his Machon, his servant. The poor guy has no idea what's about to happen. And the Rebbe Marash tells him as follows. Don't faint. That's how he starts the conversation. Wake a guy up in the middle of the night. Don't faint. That's a great warning. Don't faint. Then he tells him in Yiddish, I will lift up and you will put on the ointment. Reb Marash made for himself an ointment, a cream. He was very, very, very heavy. His body had layers. And under the layers, the acid from sweat had burned away his skin. So he had raw flesh. And it was like he always had salt on his wounds because he sweat a lot. He used to perspire like crazy. And the pain must have been impossible to a person to suffer. He had these open sores on his body from his heaviness and the perspiration. So he tells his shamish, I'll lift up and you'll put on the ointment, the cream, that'll a little bit take away the pain. Anyway, he lifted up the first layer, the shamish took one look and he chalished. So now the Rebbe Marash had two jobs. He had to put the poor guy back to bed and then he had to take care of himself. He was a moedik Bal Yisurim. He suffered physically, unimaginably. But he trucked. The Rebbe Marash never stopped for a second. The Rebbe Marash was very close to his Rebbetzin. Bechlal, the Rebbeim were close to the Rebbetzin. But the Rebbe Marash was extra close to the Rebbetzin Rivka. And part of the reason they were so close, and I talked about this Tuesday when I spoke to the seminary Beis girls, was because the Rebbetzin Rivka was an orphan. The Rebbetzin Rivka did not have a normal childhood. Her parents passed away when she was very little. And when the Rebbe Marash married her, and they were all of 13 or 14 years old, maybe the Rebbetzin Rivka was a year older, but they were not 25. The Rebbe Marash had to teach her how to be a wife and how to be a mother because she didn't see it. Because her parents passed away before she was old enough to learn those lessons. So they would literally do the books together. And they would talk about chinuch, how to raise the kids. The Rebbe Marash was involved with his family differently than most Rabbeim were. It was very close to the Rebbe Tzedivka. And the mutual respect they had for each other was unbelievable. But he said once, in Yiddish he spoke, he said, Ich hab gekehrt Horven 23,5 Show Mesles und sie hat von dem gar nicht gewusst. You understand Yiddish? I could work 23 and a half hours out of a day. That means he slept half an hour. I could work 23 and a half hours out of a day. And she knew nothing. In other words, he hid pashas from his own wife. He was extremely, the Rebbe said in the first Pasuk Lagani, the Rebbe Marash valued his time. He valued his minutes. He valued time so much, his fabringens were short. Every minute was very, very precise. It was very, very, very precise with what he did with his time. I'm sorry, 1 second. I'm sorry. So he was always busy. What are tzaddikim busy with? Obviously, tzaddikim are busy with serving the Eibishter. But by the Rebbe Marash, it was extremely, extremely, extremely precise. Now, what I wanted to talk about with you would be the following. First of all, the Rebbe Marash, of all our Rebbes, before he was Rebbe, may have been the biggest nister. The Rebbe Marash hid himself. When the Rebbe Tzemach Tzedek was alive, he had 7 boys, yeah? The Rebbe Marash was considered the rotten apple. He was considered the bum. He was the OTD, you understand? Of all the 7 boys, the Rebbe Marash was the biggest disappointment. Nobody knew who he was. Because officially he had a lot of money and he traveled for business. The whole thing was a front. But he was extremely, extremely tzanua. He was very, 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 he hid himself. But how much can you hide? Things would trickle out. He had an older brother that he was very close to. His name was the Mariel, Yehuda Leib. He was the second of his brothers. And Maharil was very famous. He was a big tzaddik. He was a big oivid. He knew a lot of Chassidus, and he cried all the time. He was a very big chassid. He was a tzaddik. When the Tzemach Tzedek passed away, he became a rebbe, but he passed away 6 months after his father. He passed away 6 months after his father. It was a big tragedy. And there's a letter from the Rebbe Marash written to his nephew, to his brother's son, where you could feel in the letter how it's like a break on top of a break. Tzemach Tzedek passes away, and then 6 months later, the Maharil passes away. It was a double punch. But everybody knew that he was a big tzaddik. So it was a chassidische Fabrengen, but Tzemach Tzedek's lifetime. And the Maharil was sitting with chassidim, and someone got him to talk about his brothers. What do you think of this brother? Or think of this brother? And he said the truth. This brother has this mila. This brother has this mila. The oldest was Ravash, our Rebbe's grandfather's grandfather. He didn't open his mouth. No, he was a very big gon and a very big tzaddik, but he was very quiet. Each one had specialties. One was expert in nigla, one was expert in halacha, one was expert in chassidus, one was expert in avodah. And the Maharil was talking about his own brothers and saying the greatnesses of each. They weren't even going to ask about the youngest because he was the businessman. He was the modern one. And some guy says, yeah, what about the youngest? What about the youngest? And they were expecting to hear something as a nit as a shade. And the Maharil says, Kulu is nube. Everything I told you, all my brothers, he's got it all. And the Chassidim said, what? Him? He? That was the Rebbe Marash. Kulu is nube. The Tzemach Tzedek, their father once said about his sons, each one had a different title. One was my Lamden, and one was my Rov, and one was my Ovid, and one was my Maskel. And when it came to the Rebbe Marash, I didn't look this up, but I think he said, he's a Mesechta b'fnei atzmei. You can't put him in the same category. But he made it his business to conceal himself. The end of the story is as follows. The Rebbe Achei Mushka, the Tzemach Tzedek's wife, passed away 5 years before her husband. She passed away in 1861 in Tavis. The Tzemach Tzedek passed away in 1866 in Nisan. Almost as soon as she passed away, the Tzemach Tzedek became sick. Tzemach Tzedek used to say, you had a mother in the flesh, and now you have a mother in Gan Eden. I need her here. When the Tzemach Tzedek lost his wife, he said, my world has gone dark. They used to fight. Tzemach Tzedek and the Rebbe Musi had a very interesting relationship. She was a very strong personality. But they were very holy. They were very close. When she passed away, Tzemach Tzedek was unconsolable. And he got sick. He got so sick that I believe toward the end of his life he was partially paralyzed. So he Poshet needed to be taken care of, physically. So the brothers took turns. There were 7 brothers. One had already actually passed away. One had moved away. So let's say there were 5 brothers living in Lubavitch. Every Shabbos, another brother would spend with their father. They'd sit by his table. They were all married. They all had families. And they would come and sit by the Tzemach Tzedek's table to be with him for Shabbos, to help him with Shabbos, to serve the food, whatever it was, to help him out. But the Rebbe Marash lived in the same house. Each one of the Tzemach Tzedek's children, when they got married, he built up a house and a shul on one of the streets of this big metropolis, Lubavitch, Lubavitch is a lot smaller than many bungalow colonies, trust me. It's a tiny place. But in every street, he built for one of his sons a shul and a house. The Rebbe Marash, for whatever reasons, his house was the Tzemach Tzedek's house. They lived in the same building. Inside what was called the chutzah, the courtyard, the separated 2 apartments was only a door. So the way it ended up happening was that Rebbe Marash and his Rebbe Tzedivke and their children were more involved with the Tzemach Tzedek in those last years than the others. So although the Rebbe Marash was the youngest of the children, and his children were the youngest of the grandchildren, in many ways the Rebbe Rashab, who was the Rebbe Marash's son, and his brothers and sisters were closer to the Tzemach Tzedek than their cousins who were 20, 30 or more years their senior, much older than them, because they lived together. And they were always going into the Tzemach Tzedek to help him and to support him, and they were very close. One of the minhagim that's interesting that we know was that, first of all, this is not about the Rebbe. The Tzemach Tzedek used to test every one of his grandchildren every week. Every week, every kid had to come into him and give him a test. Maybe they came in groups, but he would test his kids on how they're doing in school. His grandkids, Yedevach, was their Machon and And on special occasions, they would go into the Tzemach Tzedek, and the Tzemach Tzedek would give them a coin. The minig was that on their birthdays, they would go into the Tzemach Tzedek, and they would give them a matbeh and get them a bracha. And of course, we all know the famous story that the Rebbe Rashab cried, how come Hashem doesn't reveal himself to me? That was on the Rebbe Rashab's birthday. But it seems like towards the end of the Tzemach Tzedek's life, the minig changed. Instead of going on your birthday, we'd go in once a week. Once a week, the grandchildren will go into the Tzemach Tzedek and get a coin. Now, I don't know about the other grandkids, but the Rebbe Rashab's kids, the Rebbe Rashab and his older brother, the Razor, he had an older sister. The Rebbe Marash had 6 children. The oldest was a girl and the youngest was a girl. The oldest was named Deveda Leah, which was after the Tzemach Tzedek's mother. The youngest was named Chaya Musya, she was after the Tzemach Tzedek's wife. That youngest daughter was the Frierdiker Rebbe's aunt, and she was also his Mechut because his son Menachem Mendel Horenstein married the Rebbe's in Chandel. The 3 of them were killed by the Rebbe Marash, lost a daughter to the Nazis' girls. The Frierdiker Rebbe had a biological aunt that was murdered in Bergen-Belsen. You should just know that's how close it was. Musya, she was still alive, Musya Horenstein. She was taken to the camps and she was killed. At the end of 1948, Tafshin Beis Mistama, Tafshin Beis, Tafshin Gimel, 1942. I think they know who Yartzeit was. And between the 2 girls were 4 boys. One of them passed away at the age of 8. His name was Avraham Sender. And the Tzemach Tzedek said about that little boy, Avraham Sender, that he was the neshama of the Alter Rebbe. The Alter Rebbe was supposed to live 8 more years. Alter Rebbe passed away at 68. He was supposed to live 76. He lost 8 years of his life. He gave away 8 years of his life to defeat Napoleon. So his neshama came in to make up those 8 years, and he was the son of the Tzemach Marash. It's very difficult to know which place he was in the family. According to the math, he should have been the oldest, at least the oldest boy. But there's a lot of contradictions. It's hard to know when he lived. But he lived till the age of 8. When he passed away like a big tzaddik, He said, Krishma was a clarity. He was a wunderkind. I don't know if any of you have been to Lubavitch, but they're rebuilding the cemetery in Lubavitch. One of the few people that has a grave is this Avraham Sender, this 8-year-old boy. Hayela dat tzaddik, he's called. So he was passed away at the age of 8. So there were 3 other sons. The oldest son was a Zalman Ad, Zalman Ad Derazor. The second son was the Rebbe Rashab, the Machon, the youngest son, who was not alive yet. He was born after the Tzemach Tzedek passed away. His name was Menachem Mendel Schneerson. So towards the end of the Tzemach Tzedek's life, once a week, the 2 boys, or the 3 boys, 2 boys would go into the Tzemach Tzedek for a coin. In the last few weeks, mamish, right before the Tzemach Tzedek passed away, it became not once a week, but every day. Every day, the boys would go into the Tzemach Tzedek. Tzemach Tzedek was very frail. He was still having yechidus, but he was very frail, and they would get a coin. On the day that Tzemach Tzedek passed, the very day Tzemach Tzedek passed, Gimel Nisan, the Rebbe Rashab was waiting for his brother, because they always went in together to get the coin from the Zayda. And his brother, the Razor, was taking his time. So he didn't want to wait anymore. So he went in by himself. And here's how it's described. There were a lot of Chassidim around. Tzemach Tzedek was very, very sick. And the Chassidim were there, and they were eating their hearts out about the health of the Rebbe. And the Rebbe Rashab had a nanny. He had a woman who took care of her. The Rebbe Marash was rich. So she had an inke, someone who looked after him. I don't know if she was a Jew or she was a not Jew. But the Rebbe Rashab was all of 5.5. And he knew that a woman is not allowed to walk between 2 men. Are you aware of that? It says in Allah, a woman is not supposed to walk between 2 men, and a man is not supposed to walk between 2 women. If you walk the streets of Crown Heights, you'll think that there's no such halacha in Shulchan Aruch. A man is not allowed to walk between 2 women. It's a halacha, it's a din. And a woman is not allowed to do 2 men. And you know what else is a weird halacha? You're not supposed to walk between 2 dogs. Api halacha, you're not supposed to walk. It's brought in the Gemara. It's brought in Shulchan Aruch. You're not supposed to walk. If there's 2 dogs walking, don't walk between them, walk around them. When I see women walking, I go to the side. As I come into the hallway, and the girls don't understand why I'm not moving, because I want you to move away from the wall, because I'm not supposed to walk between 2 women. It's a din of Shulchan Aruch. Sorry, people, I didn't make the rules. Those are the rules. The Rebbe Rashab was 5. He knew that halacha. So he came to the room outside his grandfather's cheder, and she was supposed to protect him from all these big chassidim. But he said to her, you walk against the wall, because there has to be a separation between you and the other men. So he was protecting her from the men. They went till the Tzemach Tzedek's door, and he told her to wait outside. He went in himself, and he got the coin. And the Tzemach Tzedek passed away before his older brother came. When the older brother came, it was too late. After the Reb Marash, Tzemach Tzedek passed away, the Reb Marash was looking for his older brother, Zalman Adam.
What was his name?
Shnei Zalman Adam. He passed away in 1908, 1909. Tafish Namachtes. He was 49 years old. He passed away very young. And the Rebbe Marash found his older son. He said to him, "Did you go into the Zayda today?" He says, "Nope, I came too late." But the Rebbe Rashab went in. And the Rebbe Marash got very excited. And he said to him, "Wo bist du gewesen? Hat ihm alles abgegeben. Why did you miss it? Why did you miss it?" He gave everything to him. He gave everything to your younger brother. In other words, you lost all of it. Whatever spiritual koiches they were to give, your younger brother went in alone and got the whole load, the whole lot of koiches that Tzemach Tzedek gave your younger brother. The Marash was disappointed. But this, what's supposed to be is what is, you understand?
It's not Tzedek.
Tzemach Tzedek gave the Rebbe Rashab a coin, and the Rebbe Marash told the Rebbe Rashab's brother, "It's terrible that you missed it because he gave every koyach to your younger brother," and that's how it remained. The Rebbe Rashab became the Rebbe when the Tzemach Tzedek Rebbe Rash passed away, and not his older brother. His older brother made it very clear. My younger brother is the Rebbe. The Razor said, "I'm not the Rebbe, my brother's the Rebbe." And the Rebbe Rashab said about his older brother, his humility, even I can't understand. The Razor was the Adam Gadol, but he made it very clear, "I'm not the Rebbe, my brother's the Rebbe." And there's a lot of sources for it, but this is one of them. So the last 5 years of the Tzemach Tzedek's life, he was extremely, extremely ill. And he became more and more dependent on his children, especially the Rebbe Marash and the Rebbe Rivka. 6 months before he passed away, he called in his youngest son, the Rebbe Marash, and told him, "I want you to start saying Chassidus now. I'm still alive, I want you to go out to the Olam and say my mother." So from Tishrei, Tzemach Tzedek passed away in Nisan, from Tishrei Tafish Chavav, 1865 to 66, the Rebbe Marash began to say Chassidus publicly, officially, by his father's instruction. 6 months later, his father passed away. After the Tzemach Tzedek passed away, there became, there's no nice way to say this, there became a huge, huge machlokes. The brothers got along fine. The brothers were good friends. But every chassid had another favorite. This one favorite, the oldest one, this one favorite. The second one, the oldest one was the Ravash, the Baruch Shalom. The second was the Yehuda Leib. The third one was the B'Sol Neach. The first was the Chaim Shnei Zalman. The fifth was Rabbi Yosef Yitzchak, who was out of the picture because he moved away. The sixth was Rabbi Yankiv, who had already passed away. And the youngest was the Rebbe Marash. So there were 4 or 5 candidates, all living in Lubavitch, on different streets. And each chassid went to his favorite son. And amongst the chassidim, it became a war. I think it was physical fights. The brothers amongst themselves would sit in the same room and talk respectively to one another. But amongst the chassidim, it was really, really not pleasant. It was not good. And it's all the Rebbe Marash's fault. You know why? Because the Tzemach Tzedek wrote a tzavah. Tzemach Tzedek wrote a tzavah. I actually copied it down on my page, word for word. Libni Yedidi v'chavivi Harav Shmuel Sheyechtia, my beloved son and my favorite, my friend, Harav Shmuel. Re'isi dach shalcha, I saw your chassidus. V'huta ve'einay ma'ayid, and I like it very much. Hashem yizbarach yichazek libcha v'sichcha. Hashem should strengthen your heart and your mind. L'hoisif oimitz, to add impetus. B'teirasei v'avedasei, in his faith and his worship. V'chazakta v'ayisal ish, be strong and be a man. Psach picha v'yo'iru dvarecha. Open your mouth and your words will shine. Chazak v'amatz, be strong and determined. Lichtev, to write Chassidus, ula'agit, and to say Chassidus. And then it says these words: V'ani soymech oisma b'sicha rab. I am giving you the grandest smicha. I'm leaning on you like you give smicha. V'leitirim mishum adam, fear no person. V'Hashem yizbarech yatzliach l'cha. Hashem should give you success. V'gashmi, so the ruchni is physically and spiritually. Lilmei, to allow me to learn and to teach. Lishma v'lasas, to guard and to do. And then it finishes: Avicha, your father, Hadei Shleimcho, is worried about you. V'tevas Hanash, and he's worried about all the chassidim, and he signs his name. Menachem Mendel ben Devei Aleh. There's also words where he says, what I told you by heart, what I heard from my grandfather, the Alter Rebbe. Tzemach Tzedek wrote us a tzavah making the Rebbe Marash Rebbe. And there's another quote that the oil that was anointed, that the Baal Shem Tov gave the Maggid to anoint the Alter Rebbe, was used to anoint the Mittel Rebbe and to anoint me, and I am using that same jug of oil to anoint you. And the Rebbe Marash hid the tzavah. The Rebbe Marash was his own worst enemy. Why? He was a real person. At some point the tzavah was discovered, and I believe people were saying it was a forgery. I don't know the politics. I just know that if the Rebbe Marash had simply told the truth, there would have been no competition. But he kept the secret, and it became very, very political. I don't have time to tell you the rest of that story, but by the end of that summer, their brothers moved away. The only brother who stayed in Lubavitch was the oldest. Our Rebbe's grandfather's grandfather, the Ravash, he stayed in Lubavitch. He did not become a Rebbe, even though he was the oldest and he was the firstborn, but a firstborn has a right to be the Mamala Mokum. Because the Tzemach Tzedek told him, don't be a Rebbe. And I promise you, if you won't be a Rebbe, you'll get double. A firstborn is supposed to get double. And he added, V'dei Revi Yeshuva Hein is going to come back to you in 4 generations. So in the Rebbe's family, in our Rebbe's family, they knew this. They knew that the Tzemach Tzedek had predicted that the oldest of the Tzemach Tzedek's sons would become a Rebbe after 4 generations. So the rumor is that Reb Leivik thought he's supposed to be a Rebbe. And when the Rebbe was engaged to be married to the Rebbe's Achei Mushka, Reb Leivik said, I made a mistake. The 4 generations don't start from the Tzemach Tzedek, they start from the Ravash. The Reb Leivik used to go around telling the Lubavitch Chassidim, my son is married to the Rebbe's daughter, and he's the next Rebbe. They wanted to kill him. But the Reb Leivik was very proud. This is the Tzemach Tzedek had said. All the others left.
Why did they leave?
Because of politics. The politics was gefährlich. The Maril, the Tzemach Tzedek, but the Chassidim.
What's with the Chassidim now?
The Tzemach Tzedek said they should all stay in Lubavitch. Tzemach Tzedek didn't mind if there was competition, all stay in Lubavitch. When the Maril left in Sivan, Tov Shavav, the Rebbe Marash looking out the window. He was old, and his son was walking with him, and the Rebbe Marash was crying. Men feared my brother of a kurzen Weg. They're taking my brother a very, very short trip. He left in Sivan. Passed away 5 months later in Cheshvan. One of the brothers, the Marin, he was from Neach, said, my father said I should stay in Lubavitch even if I don't get covered. But he didn't say I should stay in Lubavitch even if people embarrass me in the street. So they left. And Lubavitch, the Rebbe Marash remained in Lubavitch. Okay, I couldn't have Shabbos.